The first time my younger brother saw my daughter, he forgot why he had come. He had driven almost 9 hours from Oklahoma to northern Colorado with a church invitation in his jacket and our mother's instructions in his phone. I was 36, 4 years into a life my family had publicly described as a disappearance, and I was kneeling on my kitchen floor trying to rescue a purple crayon from under the refrigerator when someone knocked. I almost ignored it. Then I looked through the narrow glass beside the door and saw Ethan. He had more gray at his temples than I remembered. He was wearing a brown work shirt with the logo of a regional courier company stitched over the pocket. For a second, he looked exactly like the boy who used to steal the marshmallows out of my cereal. Then he lifted his hand to knock again, and I saw our mother in the way his mouth tightened before doing something uncomfortable. I opened the door. Sloane. He said my name like he had found a person in a place where only a rumor was supposed to live. Before I could answer, 6-year-old Wren came racing down the hallway in mismatched socks, holding a cardboard crown she had made at school. "Mom, can you fix the—" She stopped when she saw him. Ethan stared at her, then at me, then past me toward the framed photograph on the living room shelf, Miles laughing into the wind at Boyd Lake, one hand shielding his eyes, the date stamped in the corner less than a year before he died. My brother's face emptied. He took 2 steps backward onto the porch and pulled out his phone. "Mom," he said when she answered, "there's a kid here." The pause. "No, Sloane's kid." Another pause, longer this time. Then his eyes moved to me, and whatever he heard from our mother made something in him collapse. "She didn't vanish," he said quietly. "You knew that, didn't you?" That was the moment the story my family had spent 4 years polishing began to crack. But it had not started with a lie. Not exactly. It had started with a compliment. When I was 25, I became the first person in my immediate family to earn a 4-year degree. I had studied respiratory therapy, then completed a bachelor's program while working evenings at a rehabilitation center. My family lived outside Tulsa in a brick ranch house with cracked driveway concrete, 2 pecan trees, and a dining room used mostly for church committee meetings. At my graduation dinner, my mother, Denise Parker, made brisket, green beans, and a chocolate cake with white icing. She placed my diploma upright against a fruit bowl so everyone could admire it. My father, Martin, called me our success story. My Aunt Lydia said I had always been the determined one. Ethan, 20 then, raised a glass of sweet tea and announced that I was officially too educated to argue with. I remember being happy. That matters because people sometimes think exploitation begins with cruelty. Mine began with praise. After dessert, my mother brought me a small notebook, dark green cover, elastic band around it. "For your grown-up life," she said. Inside the front cover she had written, "We all rise together." On the next page was a number, $850. I thought it was a joke until she explained that the property taxes were due. Dad's hours had been cut, and I was the one with steady prospects now. She did not demand anything. She did not have to. Everyone was sitting there. My father looked embarrassed but said nothing. Ethan stared at his plate. Aunt Lydia touched my wrist and said, "Family helps family." So I transferred the money the next morning. A month later, my mother texted that the air conditioner was struggling. Then Dad needed dental work. Then Ethan needed help with a security deposit after moving closer to his job. Then there was a church fundraiser, then a car repair, then an insurance deductible. At first, each request arrived dressed as an emergency. After a while, emergencies became the household calendar. By 27, I was sending between $1,000 and $1,600 most months, sometimes more. I worked nights at a pulmonary step-down unit in Kansas City, then later moved to Denver for better pay and specialized training. I picked up weekend shifts, holidays, respiratory call coverage, anything that added differential pay. My coworkers thought I was ambitious. I thought I was loyal. There is a difference, and it can take years to notice. I kept my own records because numbers calmed me. I had a spreadsheet with every transfer, date, reason, and amount. I never showed it to anyone. I told myself it was practical, not resentful. But part of me already knew something was wrong. The explanations never quite matched the evidence. One winter, my mother called crying because the water heater had finally given up. I sent $1,900 that afternoon. 3 months later, during a video call with Ethan, I saw the old rust-colored tank behind him in the utility room. I asked if they had not replaced it yet. He looked confused. Replace what? The water heater. He glanced over his shoulder. Oh, Dad fixed that valve himself. Cost maybe $80. I remember how fast I protected my mother from my own conclusion. Maybe there had been another expense. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she had moved money around. Maybe Dad had forgotten. I became skilled at inventing explanations that required everyone but me to be innocent. Then I met Miles Carter. He was a municipal bridge inspector with sun-faded caps, pencils behind one ear, and a habit of reading warning labels in dramatic voices while cooking. We met when he found me beside a dead car battery after my shift. I already had jumper cables, so he offered breakfast instead. Miles noticed the money before I admitted there was anything to notice. Every payday I became tense, moved money between accounts, and declined plans I could have afforded if I had not been supporting a second household. One evening he asked if I was in debt. I said no. He asked if someone was ill. No again. Finally he asked, "Are you supporting your parents?" I became defensive because the question sounded different outside my family. You don't understand them. That may be true, he said. Then he stopped pressing. The fact that he respected my refusal unsettled me more than an argument would have. He proposed beside a frozen lake with a simple ring and a brass washer stamped with the coordinates of the apartment we planned to share. So we remember where home started, he said. When I told my mother, she asked about his pension, whether we would combine finances, and whether I would still remember the people who got me where I am. Hours later, she texted privately for another $1,200 and asked me not to mention it to Dad. I sent it. The next morning, Miles made coffee while I carried a secret that had nothing to do with romance and still felt like betrayal. I was protecting a financial system that already had a claim on our future. The first serious fracture came 2 years later. I had worked 14 hours during a winter surge and fallen asleep on the couch, still wearing my hospital badge. My phone died overnight. The transfer I usually sent my parents on the last Friday of every month did not go through until Monday. 72 hours late. My mother called before sunrise. She did not shout. Denise rarely shouted when disappointment would do more damage. I had to cover things from savings, she said. I'm sorry, my phone died and Sloane, everybody gets tired. I closed my eyes. She continued in that measured voice she used when leading women's Bible study. But when people depend on you, you don't get to disappear into your own problems. I was standing in the laundry room, trying to find clean scrubs. I didn't disappear. You know what I mean. I did. She meant I had forgotten my assigned place. I apologized, set up a backup transfer, and spent the drive to work designing safeguards against ever inconveniencing my family with my exhaustion again. That memory embarrasses me now, but I refuse to lie about who I was then. I was not secretly strong. I was not waiting for the right moment to rebel. I was afraid of being called selfish because I had built my entire identity around being the person nobody could reasonably accuse of selfishness. And then, one rainy Thursday in March, the universe removed every excuse I had left. Miles was inspecting an aging overpass west of Denver when a maintenance vehicle lost control in a closed lane. The call came through the hospital because his identification listed me as his emergency contact. A supervisor asked me to sit down. I did not. He said there had been an accident. I asked which trauma center. He looked at me for half a second too long. I had spent 11 years watching families understand terrible news from a clinician's face before the words arrived. That day, I became one of them. Miles died at the scene. There are events that divide life into before and after, but grief does not feel like a clean division when you are inside it. It feels administrative. There were forms. There was his phone password. There was a coat in the hall closet. There were 2 toothbrushes in a cup until there was one. There were condolence casseroles from people I barely knew, and 3 voicemail messages from my mother asking whether I had seen the flowers the family sent. Nobody from Oklahoma came to the funeral. My father said he could not miss work. My mother said Aunt Lydia's blood pressure had been unstable and someone needed to stay close. Ethan said he wanted to come, but did not have enough vacation days. I told them I understood. The funeral was on Saturday. On Tuesday, my mother texted, "I hate to ask while you're dealing with all this, but are we still okay for the usual amount this month?" I stared at the message for so long the screen went dark. Then I transferred the M. Wani. That is one of the hardest parts of this story for people to understand. Why did I keep paying? Because a lifetime of conditioning does not dissolve when something awful happens. Sometimes disaster makes the old rules feel safer. When your world has just split open, obedience can look like a railing. 2 weeks later, I vomited during a respiratory code drill. My friend Jasmine Reed watched me rinse my mouth and said, "You're taking a pregnancy test." I laughed. She did not. I had assumed grief had disrupted my cycle. I was nearly 18 weeks pregnant. The ultrasound screen showed a curved spine, small hands, a heartbeat that seemed impossibly determined. I lay there with cold gel on my stomach and felt Joy arrive tangled so tightly with terror I could not separate them. Miles and I had talked about children in the vague future tense people use when they think the future owes them time. We had never known. I drove home from the appointment with one hand resting over the slight swell under my sweater. That night, I pulled up my spreadsheet. For the first time, I totaled everything. $112,480. That was what I had sent my family over 7 years. Not counting gifts. Not counting flights home. Not counting groceries when I visited, or the used SUV I had helped Ethan buy. I stared at the total until it stopped looking like money. It looked like maternity leave I did not have, a college fund, a safer apartment, therapy, time. Miles's life insurance was modest, and because we had not yet married, parts of his estate were complicated. My obstetrician was already concerned about my blood pressure. I was alone and carrying a baby. For the first time, I understood that continuing to support my parents did not merely cost me. It would cost my child. That changed the equation. I called my mother on a Sunday afternoon. I had rehearsed 3 sentences. Miles died. I'm pregnant. I cannot keep sending money. I intended to say them in that order. Fear changed it. When she answered, I said, "Mom, I need to stop the monthly transfers." Silence. Then, for how long? I don't know, maybe permanently. Another silence. Sloane, don't be dramatic. My heart started racing. I'm not being dramatic. I need my income here. For what? I almost laughed. That question was the whole family in 2 words. For my life. She inhaled sharply. Your father and I sacrificed so you could have that life. I know you worked hard. We did more than work hard. We put you first. Mom, I've sent over $100,000. The number escaped before I planned to use it. Her voice changed. You're keeping score now. No, I'm looking at reality. So this is what Miles put in your head. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. Miles is dead. It was the first sentence on my list, delivered in the wrong order, too late, and into a conversation that had already chosen its subject. My mother said nothing. I waited. Then she asked, when did that happen? 3 weeks ago. The pause. We sent flowers. I felt something inside me go quiet. I'm also pregnant. This time, the silence lasted longer. How far? Almost 5 months. And you're telling me now. I tried to tell you what was happening. Every conversation became about money. That is not fair. My pulse was pounding behind my eyes. Maybe not, but I'm done sending it. My mother began to cry. Not loudly, small injured sounds. I don't know who you are anymore. I wanted to comfort her. That instinct survived everything. I hated it. Mom, I'm asking you to hear me. I've heard enough. The line disconnected. I called back. No answer. I called my father. He picked up in the garage. I could hear sports radio in the background. Dad, did Mom tell you? She's very upset. I'm pregnant. Miles died. There was a pause so long, I checked the screen to make sure the call had not dropped. Finally, he said, I'm sorry about Miles. Then, after another silence, maybe give your mother a few days. You know money makes her anxious. I stood in my kitchen and understood that my father's passivity was not neutrality. It was participation with softer hands. Did you hear me say I'm pregnant? Yes. And I don't want to get in the middle. I almost screamed. Instead, I said, there shouldn't be a middle. Then I ended the call. That was the last direct conversation I had with either of my parents for 4 years. According to my family, that was when I vanished. According to me, that was when I stopped volunteering for emotional demolition. The months after that call were not brave. I had panic attacks in grocery aisles over buying anything my mother would have called unnecessary. The first month my money stayed in my own account, I checked the balance repeatedly because keeping it felt like stealing. Jasmine never ordered me not to call my parents. She asked what I expected to happen. Then, if I did, my therapist, Dr. Priya Nandakumar, asked an even harder question after I spent an appointment explaining what made me a good daughter. What makes them good parents? I had no answer. At 7 months pregnant, I moved into a small Loveland townhouse with narrow stairs and a tiny yard. Jasmine helped me paint the nursery yellow and assemble a second-hand crib. At first, spending money on my own baby felt disloyal. Slowly, it began to feel like what it was, care. I wrote one letter to my paternal grandmother, Ruth Parker. Ruth was 80 at the time and lived alone in a white bungalow outside Tulsa. She was sharp, stubborn, arthritic, and allergic to sentimental nonsense. When I was a child, she was the only adult in the family who would answer a question with, I don't know, instead of inventing certainty. I told her everything. Miles. The pregnancy. The transfers. The phone call. My new address. I did not ask her to take sides. I asked only that one person back home know I had not disappeared. Weeks passed. No reply. That hurt more than I expected. I told myself she was old. Maybe the letter was lost. Maybe my handwriting was terrible. Maybe she had decided my mother was right. By then, I was practiced at surviving unanswered questions. Wren Carter Parker arrived 5 weeks early on a snowy morning in January. She weighed barely over 5 pounds and had a furious cry that sounded far too large for her body. Jasmine stood beside me because there was no one else. When the nurse placed Wren on my chest, I looked down at her dark hair and Miles's long fingers and felt grief and love collide so violently that I could barely breathe. I whispered, "You were wanted before I knew you were here." That became the promise I organized my life around. Not that she would never be hurt. Not that I would never make mistakes. That she would never have to earn her place with me. The first year was exhausting, in ordinary, merciful ways. Feeding schedules. Daycare waitlists. medical bills, a baby who considered sleep an insult. I returned to work and moved into pediatric respiratory care, which gave me more regular hours. Jasmine became Wren's godmother in every way that mattered except paperwork. Her parents invited us to Thanksgiving. Her mother, Gloria, sent me home with leftovers without attaching a moral lesson to the foil container. I did not know how hungry I was for uncomplicated kindness until people started giving it to me. Every December, I mailed Ruth a holiday card with a photograph of Wren. I included my return address. I never heard back. Still, I sent them. Some stubborn part of me wanted a record somewhere in Oklahoma that we existed. The years without my parents were not empty. That surprised me. I had expected no contact to feel like a permanent emergency. Instead, after the first year, the quiet became ordinary enough that I sometimes forgot to be afraid of it. Wren learned to ride a balance bike in the cul-de-sac, while Jasmine jogged beside her in slippers. Gloria taught me how to make biscuits and never once asked why I was not taking Wren home for Christmas. When I had pneumonia and could barely stand, Jasmine slept on our couch for 3 nights, set alarms for my antibiotics, and took Wren to daycare without turning the help into a debt. The first time I tried to repay her for groceries, she pushed the cash back across the table. "You can buy next week's groceries if you want," she said, "but you don't owe me a relationship fee." I laughed, then went into the bathroom and cried. That was how damaged my understanding of care had become. Kindness without accounting made me suspicious. Dr. Nandekumar helped me notice how often I translated affection into obligation. If someone babysat, I overcompensated. If a coworker covered a shift, I offered 2 in return. If Gloria gave Wren a winter coat, I spent days searching for a gift of equal value. Reciprocity is healthy, Dr. Nandekumar told me. Compulsive repayment is fear. That distinction took time. So did learning not to over-explain boundaries. At first, every no came with a paragraph. I could not attend. I was sorry. Here were 6 reasons. I hoped nobody was upset. Eventually, I practiced shorter sentences. "No, I can't. That doesn't work for me. I'm not discussing that." Nothing terrible happened when I stopped providing closing arguments for my own decisions. Wren grew up inside those experiments. She saw me apologize when I was wrong and refused to apologize when I was merely inconvenient. I was determined not to raise a child who confused compliance with goodness. I still made mistakes. I worked too much. I snapped when I was tired. Once I missed her preschool costume day and cried harder than she did. But I learned to repair without turning the repair into a performance. I was wrong, I told her. Not, I was tired because you were difficult. Not, I did my best so you should forgive me. Just the truth. That mattered to me more than appearing like a perfect mother ever could. Meanwhile, back home, my mother was building another record entirely. I learned the details later from Ethan. At first, Denise told people I was going through something. Then she said I needed space. Then, when neighbors asked why I had missed a family wedding, she lowered her voice and said they had not been able to reach me. That phrasing spread. By the next year, People at their church spoke openly about me as if I were lost. Some assumed addiction. Some assumed a controlling partner, apparently unaware that the partner they were inventing had been dead before my mother began telling the story. One woman told my aunt she prayed I would find my way back to the family. My mother never corrected any of it. She did something more effective. She looked wounded. A lie can be challenged. A carefully managed silence recruits volunteers. For 4 years, I was the absent daughter in a story that rewarded my mother every Sunday for enduring me. And 4 years later, Ethan finally knocked on my door. After the phone call on my porch, Ethan stood there looking as if the house had rearranged gravity. Wren tilted her head. "Are you Mom's friend?" He swallowed. "I'm her brother." Wren looked at me for confirmation. I nodded. That was all it took for her. Children are astonishingly willing to accept reality when adults stop contaminating it. "Oh," she said, "then you're my uncle." Ethan sat down on the porch step. He covered his face with both hands. I had imagined seeing my brother again many times. None of those versions included him crying on my porch, while I felt angry that he got to collapse in front of me after I had collapsed alone. Still, I let him inside. At the kitchen table, he asked about Miles first. That mattered. I told him about the accident, the pregnancy, the call to our parents, and the 4 years afterward. "She told us you chose him over the family," Ethan said. "Miles was dead." "I know that now." She knew. He stared at the table. I didn't. "Did you ever ask?" "No." The answer hurt, but at least he did not decorate it. Ethan told me our parents had never lost the house or gone without utilities after my transfers stopped. Dad worked extra hours. Mom reduced some spending. Ethan paid more of his own bills. Life continued. Then he handed me an invitation to Heritage Sunday at New Covenant Fellowship. Across the top, in gold letters, it said, "Come home to what matters." "She wants you there," he said. "She says she wants to make things right." "Does she know what right means?" He looked down. "I'm starting to think she doesn't." Before leaving, he asked Wren for a hug instead of assuming he deserved one. She gave it to him. I did not call the moment healing. It was simply information. Something in my brother might still be capable of becoming safe. By evening, the extended family had found my number. A cousin added me to the old group chat, and the story changed almost instantly. I was no longer the daughter who had vanished. I was the woman who had hidden a child from a grieving mother. What no one asked was louder. Who was Wren's father? What happened to him? Was I safe? How had I raised a baby alone? They wanted an explanation for their exclusion, not an understanding of my life. I muted the chat. The next evening, my mother called for the first time in 4 years. She cried, said she had missed me every day, and insisted she had only told people she could not find me because she was protecting my privacy. Then she asked me to attend Heritage Sunday. Her plan was elegant. She would explain that after Miles's death, I had suffered an emotional collapse during pregnancy and withdrawn from everyone. Grief, stress, dangerous blood pressure, those would account for my absence. No mention of the money. No mention that she and Dad had known exactly why I stopped calling. "We don't need to humiliate anybody," she said. "We can let people see that the family survived something painful." The family. You know what I mean. I did. She was offering me a role in a kinder version of the same lie. Was I mentally ill, Mom? You were under tremendous stress. That isn't what I asked. I'm trying to give you a way back without destroying relationships. Back to what? She had no answer. I said I would think about Sunday and hung up shaking. Jasmine found me at the sink and swore so loudly that Wren called from the patio to remind her about grown-up words. I laughed, then cried. Recovery was often like that for me. Not peace, just proof that pain no longer owned every room. 2 nights later, an Oklahoma number appeared on my screen. I nearly let it ring out. Then I answered. Sloane. The voice was dry, rough, and unmistakable. Grandma Ruth. Well, unless somebody stole my lungs and my attitude. I sat down on the hallway floor. For a few seconds, I could not speak. Ruth rescued me by complaining about the price of peaches. Then she got serious. I got your letter. My throat closed. 4 years ago. Every page. And the cards. Everyone. Why didn't you answer? I tried once. She explained that after my first letter, she had written back and asked Ethan to mail it because her arthritis made driving difficult. He had left the envelope on my parents' kitchen counter while helping my father move a freezer. My mother found it. She told Ruth she would take care of postage. The letter never arrived. After that, Ruth stopped trusting outgoing mail that passed through family hands. She did not have my number, and she was embarrassed to admit she did not know how to search for it without asking someone. So she kept the cards. All of them. In my recipe tin, she said. Under the cornbread card nobody uses because everybody puts too much sugar in theirs. I laughed through tears. Then Ruth said something that changed the geometry of the whole story. Your mother found those cards last Thanksgiving. I stopped breathing for a second. What? She came over to borrow my roasting pan. The tin was open. She saw Wren's school picture on top, picked it up, read the card, read the next one too. My scalp prickled. My address was on every envelope. I know. And she still told people she didn't know where I was. I know. Why didn't you tell anyone? Ruth was quiet. Because I was cowardly longer than I like admitting. It was the first clean admission of failure I had heard from anyone in my family. No explanation disguised as innocence. No demand for forgiveness. Just truth. She continued. I told myself Denise would stop. Then I told myself it was not my fight. Then I got sick this spring and realized staying neutral had mostly meant staying comfortable. Ruth had developed pulmonary fibrosis. She was on oxygen most days now. I don't know how much time I've got, she said, but I know I don't want to spend it pretending confusion where there isn't any. I pressed my forehead to my knees. I thought you believed her. I believed you were hurt. That's different. It is. Then her voice brightened slightly. Now Ethan tells me there is a little girl in Colorado who has my eyebrows. She does. I need proof. I laughed. Ruth did not ask me to attend church. She asked me to bring Wren for lunch. Just lunch. Her house. Saturday. No audience. That request I could say yes to. After the call, I sat on the floor for a long time with my phone in my lap. Part of me wanted to cancel immediately. Ruth had believed me, and suddenly that felt almost more dangerous than rejection. Rejection I understood. Belief created hope, and hope had always been the doorway through which my family got back in. Jasmine listened while I explained every possible disaster. Mom could show up. Dad could show up. Half the church could show up. Ruth could change her mind. Ethan could decide he had made a mistake by contacting me. Jasmine waited until I ran out of catastrophes. Do you want Wren to meet Ruth? Yes. Do you want to see Ruth? Yes. Then build the visit around those two yesies. That became our plan. No staying at a relative's house. No family dinner. No surprise visits. Our own car, our own hotel, our own exit. I emailed Ruth the boundaries before we left, because saying them in writing felt easier. She replied through Ethan with 4 words, "Your child, your rules." I read that line 6 times. It should not have felt revolutionary. On the drive south, Wren asked why she had never met my parents. I had prepared age-appropriate explanations with Dr. Nandekumar, but the real questions still hurt. Sometimes grown-ups love each other and still don't know how to treat each other safely, I said. Did they hurt you? Sometimes. Did you hurt them? I looked at the highway. Sometimes I probably did, but saying no to something that hurts you is not the same as hurting someone. She thought about that while eating pretzels. Then she asked if Ruth had a dog. Children are merciful that way. They visit the edge of your deepest wound and then remember snacks. At the hotel that Friday night, I barely slept. Every car door in the parking lot sounded like someone from my past arriving. I checked the deadbolt twice, then felt embarrassed, then reminded myself that hypervigilance was not evidence that I had made the wrong choice. It was evidence that my body remembered choices I had once been unable to make. Wren slept sideways across her bed, completely certain I would still be there in the morning. I wanted to become worthy of that certainty, without making it another debt I had to repay. I planned the Oklahoma visit with embarrassing precision. Jasmine came with us, and we stayed in a hotel outside Tulsa so nobody could trap us with hospitality. Saturday morning, Ruth was waiting on her porch with oxygen tubing behind one ear and her cardigan buttoned wrong. Wren carried a drawing and marched straight up the steps. I made your hair too big, she told Ruth. Mom says it used to be huge. Ruth looked at me. You've raised a dangerous woman. For several hours, we simply had lunch. Wren inspected ceramic birds, Jasmine washed dishes against orders, and Ruth narrated old family photographs. Ordinary time felt almost sacred. Then Ruth brought out the metal recipe tin. Understained index cards were every holiday photograph I had mailed. Wren as a baby, at preschool, holding a pumpkin, missing a front tooth. The corners were softened from being handled. Ruth had not just kept them, she had looked at them. "I'm sorry I stayed quiet," she said. Before I could answer, Aunt Lydia arrived with a casserole and an excuse. She saw me, saw Wren, and within minutes I could almost hear information leaving the house with her. By evening, Ethan texted that Mom knew I was in town and had announced at a volunteer dinner that, after years of prayer, her daughter and granddaughter had returned and would attend Heritage Sunday. I wanted to leave immediately. Jasmine said she would drive if I chose to go, then added, "Just make sure you're leaving because you want to, not because she can still make a whole city feel off limits." I hated the sentence because it was useful. That night, Ethan came to the hotel carrying a black binder and his laptop. While helping Ruth with insurance paperwork, he had found our mother's financial records. The records were meticulous. My parents' mortgage had been manageable. The water heater emergency had cost less than $100. The dental crisis had been mostly covered. Large portions of my transfers had gone instead to church donations, retreat sponsorships, loans to relatives, a cousin's apartment deposit, and a renovation fund, all credited publicly to my mother's generosity. 2 days after I sent $2,700 for Dad's supposed dental emergency, Denise had recorded a $2,500 community relief gift. "She was giving my money away," I said. Ethan turned the binder back decades. My mother's earlier records told a different story. At 23, she had sold jewelry to pay her own mother's electric bill and her brother's rent. Later, she handed over tax refunds, covered Lydia's debts, and repeatedly wrote the same phrase beside family expenses: "Family first." "She thinks whoever can pay is supposed to pay," Ethan said. "Then everybody owes loyalty to the person who saved them." For the first time, I could see that my mother had inherited the rules she imposed on me. It did not excuse her. A wound can be learned and still be a wound. But the discovery changed my goal. I did not want to defeat her. I wanted to stop repeating her. Around 2 in the morning, Wren woke for water and asked, "Are we seeing your mom tomorrow?" "Maybe." "Is she nice?" I chose the most honest answer I could give a child. "I don't know if she knows how to be safe with us yet." Wren nodded. "Then we can sit by Aunt Jazz." That was when I decided to go, not for reconciliation and not for revenge, but because I would not let my silence become something my daughter inherited. New Covenant Fellowship was packed the next morning. Ruth sat near the aisle with her oxygen concentrator, Jasmine beside Wren, Ethan near the back, and my father against the wall with his eyes on the floor. My mother wore a pale blue suit and the composed expression she used at funerals. During a testimony segment, Denise walked to the front and spoke about prayer, waiting, and families restored after seasons of confusion. Then she looked directly at me. "My daughter is with us today." Heads turned. My hands went cold. For 1 second, I was back in the laundry room apologizing because a transfer had arrived late. Then Wren slipped her hand into mine because she wanted me to open a packet of fruit snacks. The ordinary need steadied me. My mother smiled. "We have all learned that grief can take people places they never intended to go." There it was, the revised story. gentle, compassionate, and still untrue. I stood. Relief flashed across her face. She thought I was accepting the role she had prepared. Instead, I stopped in the center aisle. Mom, I did not leave because grief made me confused. Her smile tightened. Sloane, we can discuss this privately. We had 4 years for private. The room went still. I stopped sending money after 7 years of supporting our household and paying for emergencies I later learned were not always emergencies. The year I supposedly disappeared, Miles died. I was pregnant with Ren. I told Mom. I called Dad. They knew how to reach me. My father closed his eyes. My mother stepped toward me. You were not yourself. I was grieving. That is not the same as being unreliable. Think about your daughter. I am. I looked around the sanct. Sanctuary. I'm not asking anyone here to choose sides. I'm asking you to stop calling a boundary a disappearance. The silence changed, not into support, into uncertainty. That was enough. For 4 years, my mother's version had been the only version in the room. Now it was only one version. Her composure cracked. Everything I ever did was for this family. And I believed she believed it. I could suddenly see the young woman in Ruth's records selling jewelry to rescue relatives, learning that love meant usefulness, and usefulness earned authority. My mother had inherited the equation she later imposed on me. But inheritance is not destiny. Maybe you did what you were taught, I said, but I'm not teaching it to Ren. So you're cutting us off. There was the old choice again. Obey or abandon, pay or disappear. No, I'm telling you what contact requires. No money, no speaking for me, no stories about my life, no access to Ren through relatives, church friends, or guilt. If you want a relationship with us, respect me as her mother and stop treating love like debt. She looked around, as if expecting someone to overrule me. Nobody did. I returned to my seat and opened Ren's fruit snacks. After the service, some people apologized and some avoided me. One older man said family matters should stay private. I asked whether he had objected while my mother discussed my absence publicly for 4 years. He left without answering. Truth did not make everyone agree with me. It simply made the lie optional. Outside, my father caught me near the parking lot. I should have asked more questions, he said. Yes. I thought staying out of it kept peace. It kept you comfortable. He nodded. I'm sorry. No explanation followed. I told him I was not ready for more. He said, okay. Ethan approached a few minutes later. Can I call Ren sometime? Call me first. I will. And don't send gifts because you feel guilty. He smiled sadly. Then what do uncles do? I looked at Ren balancing on a curb. They show up. Over the next year, he did. He called on Sundays, remembered Ren's school events, and never carried one of Mom's messages unless I asked. Trust did not return because of a single apology. It returned in small installments because his behavior changed. Ruth visited Colorado once, driven by Ethan. She sat in our yard under 2 blankets and taught Ren a card game she cheated at openly. 3 months later, Ruth died in her sleep. I was with her during her last week. My mother came to the funeral. We spoke for less than 5 minutes. She said she was working through a lot. I told her I hoped she did. She never apologized. For a long time, I thought closure required her to understand what she had done. Eventually, I realized that was another way of leaving my peace in her hands. My father sends cards sometimes. I answer some of them. My mother has respected no contact for almost a year. Whether that comes from growth, pride, or exhaustion is not something I need to solve. My life is quieter now. I still work in pediatric respiratory care. Ren is 7 and loses library books with impressive consistency. Jasmine has a key to our townhouse. Ethan knows Ren's favorite cereal and has learned that family is less about access than reliability. Beside our front door hangs the brass washer Miles gave me when he proposed, stamped with the coordinates of the apartment we never got to share. For years, I thought those numbers marked the home I lost. Now I think they mark where I first began learning what home should mean. Home is where you are allowed to be tired, where your no does not erase your name, where love is not entered in a ledger and collected later with interest. I did not disappear. I stopped paying for belonging and discovered which relationships survived without the payment. Some did not. That hurt. Some changed. That took time. And some were built afterward by people who never asked me to earn my place. That is the family I trust now. If someone you care about has been taught that love must be purchased with money, silence, or endless sacrifice, share this story with them. Tell me in the comments what boundary helped you reclaim your own life. Subscribe to After Silence Stories for more stories about betrayal, recovery, and chosen family. And I'll see you in the next episode.